Hey y'all, this is Moni.
And this is Kat.
Okay. And this is the Fake Ass Book Club. Wait, can we both say it or no?
Hey guys, welcome back to the Fake Ass Book Club. This is your girl Moni.
And this is Kat.
Hey Kat.
Hey Moni.
What's up?
Oh my goodness, we were just talking about how beautiful today is. So I would say, what's up? The sun.
Okay, that's what's up, friends. You know, we are back for another fun episode this week. We are getting into the things. This week we are reviewing a book by Janet Savage. It is Jay Gatsby, A Black Man in a White Face. I cannot wait to jump into this. I know. We announced it before, but we're for real this time.
Oh, okay.
It's happening. And so luckily for us, we have a fabulous guest in the building with us. So fabulous guest, please introduce yourself to our listeners, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. My name is Ebony Chappel. I go by Ebony the Writer on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And I am a huge fan of the Fab Podcast. So I am thrilled to be with y'all again today. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. We're also big fans. I would like to say I was a fan of yours before you were a fan of ours. So
Hilarious.
Just for a little one-upsmanship.
First of all, she's so
which
petty.
is what I'm all about. So yeah, it is fun though to be able to fellowship with people who are also, fans of you. You know what I mean? Like I actually get to meet the people I'm fans of. It's awesome.
It is awesome. So we're in for a treat today, you guys. So I think before we get into this week's episode, we are going to do things the Fab way, and we're going to dedicate this episode. So hands over your hearts, everyone. First and foremost, we want to thank our patrons. You guys are the best. You already know this. We say it every week because it's true. Thank you so much for your continued support. And also this week, I think I want to dedicate this to building legacy and lasting legacies. I think it's really important to consider your work, like your life, a work of art, because it's the one thing you leave behind with people. So, yeah, that's my dedication this week. What about you, friends?
Yes, and that. I want to dedicate this episode to all the light-skinned Negroes passing for white who helped non-passing Negroes. Because a lot of times those were the people who would pretend to be white and buy people and helped in the Underground Railroad and stuff like that. So for all the ones who decided to exert their privilege to help others, this one's for you.
I like that. Ebony, we can invite you to, do you have a dedication this week, love?
You know what? I will echo both of your dedications, and then I will also give a dedication to women that like to find shit out and dig down deep. Troublesome women, because they are the backbone of our society. So this is a shout out to all the women that make things hard for people that want to keep the bullshit going.
Get over. To all the perverse and rebellious women.
Yes.
Keep it going.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Listen, that was the best dedication ever. So that basically closed things out. If y'all didn't know, that's the energy we're on today, y'all.
Yes,
we're definitely on that energy. And so with that, I want to give you guys a little synopsis about the book. So it says, what if Gatsby is a black man passing as a white one? Jay Gatsby, Black Man in White Face, expounds upon the thesis that Jay Gatsby, the much-beloved hero of the Great Gatsby, is a man of mixed black and white parentage who pretends and appears to be a white man. Through a close examination of text, a review of F. Scott Fitzgerald's life and letters, the book explains how America's troubled conscience about race laces through the novel. Yes. Oh my gosh.
How have we not heard about this before?
I really don't know.
I know.
I really don't know. I mean, I feel like it's...
Is that
in the background?
Oh, look, it's Ricky Racism.
Oh, man.
Kat, I am done with you.
He shows up every episode.
Listen, I love it.
Get out of here, Ricky.
This is your as much as this man gets on my nerves, this is your Kenya Scott Embarrass. It's about slavery.
Every time.
It's
Also,
slavery.
if you can believe it, also slavery.
Also slavery.
That's what people don't know. His series Black AF, every single episode is called "It Was Because of Slavery."
Yep.
And he was like, "No, it was still slave." Every single episode.
Slavery.
If you can believe it, slavery.
Slavery. Okay. Oh my
pretty-
gosh. I
it's a
can't
pretty
wait
big
until
deal.
we have the actual physical manifestation
Well, it's coming.
of
It's
the
coming.
character Ricky Racism.
Of Ricky
that she's
Racism.
gonna be,
Ooh,
yeah,
I
child.
just need
Yes.
14 uninterrupted hours
Right,
to
it's
do some
coming.
character design.
right in the midst.
That's all.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I don't want to surprise you or anything, but like, do you mind telling the people a little bit about our author today, Miss Janet Savage,
I don't mind at all.
the troublemaker that she is?
Shout out to her.
Yes, I'm a big fan, big fan. So Janet Savage was born in Chicago and is a graduate of Stanford University and Harvard Law School. She resides in Los Angeles with her husband, where she practices entertainment law and owns a college consulting company. She's written articles for Dollars and Cents magazine and Harvard Law School magazine and has published flash fiction. This is her first book of literary criticism. So it should be Janet Savage Esquire.
Okay. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
So she's a lawyer.
I love when
Absolutely
people
right.
add that to the end
She's
of
a
their
woman
name.
of letters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that too. It sounds really
Yeah,
fancy.
she's a big deal.
Esquire. I like it.
Yeah.
All right. So where do we even begin, you guys? I guess we should begin at the actual story of the Great Gatsby. I feel like Ebony and I were talking about this a little bit before the show, and I'm like, sure, I'm pretty sure I've read this, but I reread it for this episode, and it's like I don't really remember it. Like, I know the story, but like the details felt like maybe I didn't read this shit. I don't remember.
So I wanted to reread it for this episode too, and I didn't. But I did remember reading it and not liking it originally.
Okay. And what was
yeah.
why not?
Like a lot of the things you're forced to read in school, it's just something
Yes.
I had to get through, and I'm like, oh, it's the Great American Novel. I'm like, okay. But now having this little tidbit of information to me, it was like, okay, now that's interesting. Now I can see why this was, a literary masterpiece.
Do you think
Yeah.
this is why people were saying that though?
No.
Okay. All right. It was just
Yeah.
his writing, I guess they were talking about?
Yeah,
maybe?
it
Okay.
sounds, when they're talking about this use of, because it is really short, right? One of the things I didn't like about the original was the fact that I'm like, why aren't you just coming out and saying stuff? Like, everything is kind of buried.
cloaked.
And where even like, I didn't like that, especially not in high school.
Yeah. I think in high school, so when I was in high school, some of my friends read this book, but the track that I was on, we did not read this. I took AP when I was in high school, and they had us reading different books. So I missed, and then also I moved schools a lot. So I missed Great Gatsby in between moving schools.
Gotcha.
So between that and being on a track where they had us reading, like, I don't even remember. The only book I remember reading in school that I enjoyed was, that I didn't read on my own account, was The Color Purple. Everything else, I was like, blah, blah, blah. I got through it so I could pass the class, but I was severely
like the
disinterested.
Scarlet Letter. Did you have to read that?
I did read the Scarlet
You know
Letter.
Hawthorne can-
and then we also had to go and see an opera based on the Scarlet Letter. And I was like,
Not the opera.
why? First of all, an opera in English is a shame before God. I'm gonna just be honest. Operas are not meant to be in English.
That sounds like a desecration, right? It needs to be in Italian or like Japanese. Like it needs to
Something
be
else.
something, yeah.
Not English.
No,
So
you're
that was
right.
not an enjoyable experience, although I appreciated certain themes of the story, but even then, whatever. It's like you're reading the white literary canon in school, so I never cared about none of that shit. But one of my good friends, his favorite book was The Great Gatsby. And then when I got older and I realized, now even with reading this, I'm like, I wonder if he even realizes what was going on, because why did he like this book so much? But I think a part of it was that idea of being able to like remake yourself into something else to get ahead. Is
But it
why they
doesn't
really
work
liked
out.
It.
Like, to me,
It
that was
doesn't.
the thing. Like, to me,
No.
now that the real reason is laid out, it was a warning. That makes sense to me. Like, if this was written as to exist as a warning, then it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But so first off, let's clear some things up. So
Here she goes. Here she goes.
I know what you're talking about. You know what I'm about to say. I can say something totally. No, you know exactly what's
My
going
head's
on.
bobbling.
So who read the book?
I read half of it.
That's reading. Okay, so but But you read the source material for the book.
I did.
So that's
I did.
There
which
you
is
go.
what I wanted to do, and I wanted to watch the movie, but it wasn't streaming on any of the platforms I already had.
Well, and I'd like to say this is why we make a great team.
It
Just naturally works out. We didn't even plan that.
Listen.
I didn't get the book. I did not read it, but I did see. I mean, I actually, because let's talk about how we found out about
Yes.
this book in general. So Kat was like, do you listen to Keke Palmer's podcast? I'm like, yes, I actually just started listening to it. I had maybe listened to 1 or 2 episodes, which shout out to Keke Palmer. Holler at us, girl. You need some book club friends. Let me let you know. I feel like we would get along just well.
And I heard you just broke up with your man. I've done that twice.
She needs the support of the sisterhood of troublesome women.
Because guess what I did every time I broke up with them niggas? Called her.
I'm here. Listen, I'm here for you. But so I actually ended up going and watching the episode that she referenced because they had Janet. She had Janet Savage on her show, and she talked in depth about what led her to write the novel or the book about the novel. And I was just like, this is super compelling. It made me want to reread the book so that I could be like, okay, I want to be able to take it in with that in the back of my head. And I honestly was like, yes.
Like it was hidden in plain sight.
Book. It just makes it a way better.
Well, and
read
I like
thinking
the
about
fact
it
that
like
she points out in American literature, unless the character's race is pointed out, you just assume they're white.
Yep.
You do.
I was like, oh, damn. She's right.
Yep.
She's right.
Yep.
Yes.
Brutal.
All right, so let's get into it. I want to know from you guys, since I didn't read the book and I'm that girl this week.
She showed up fake.
You know what I'm saying? Somebody has
But-
to do
but
it to make
that's
it
the
count.
beauty.
Yeah,
That's
to
the
make it
beauty of
count.
it.
But I'm interested to know from you guys, like, so from your perspective, this doesn't read. It's not a novel or anything like that. It feels like a companion piece that you read alongside the actual novel, giving you the context of why, and kind of like proving a thesis.
Well, I like how she pointed out it was actually a series of Facebook posts is how it started.
Okay.
And then she was like, okay, actually there's something here. Like, I think that was the thing. Like, it doesn't, that's what the wonderful thing about books. They don't always start as books.
No, they don't. And what was so cute to me too, Keke Palmer was saying that her character on The Proud Family 2, not this second, have you seen the second season when they're older?
A little
now?
bit louder and prouder.
Oh my God, it's so freaking cute. She's a character on there, and
I
her
didn't
name
know
is
that.
Maya, and she's the loudmouth one we was talking about before. She's
Love
the one pointing out
it.
all the crazy stuff, and in a throwaway line, her character was like, Great Gatsby's black, right? And she was like, yo, she was the voice actor, so she was like, wait a minute. So
Where
she
did
was
y'all
like,
get that from?
Right. So she started
Okay.
digging into it and realizing that there was like this, like there was sort of this school of thought somewhere. So that's how she found out about Janet Savage. That's why she started going down the rabbit hole trying to talk about it and got her on her show.
And that's why Paul Mooney said that, where he was like, man, a white man loves to look at his family tree, but he don't want to shake it because a nigger will fall out.
Hello. That is one of my, I have so many Paul Mooney quotes that I love, and that is one of my favorite.
Yeah, that lives
because
rent
it's
free
true.
in my head for
Oh,
sure.
yes.
So do you think Jay-Z knew when he did the soundtrack?
That's so funny. That's why and she mentioned
To
that
the
on her
second
show
movie
too.
with Leonardo DiCaprio.
yes,
Okay, yeah.
when he did the soundtrack for
think so?
Gatsby.
Honestly, I would not be surprised because Jay-Z is a super intellectual person, and when you listen to his music, I'm a huge Jay-Z fan, and the references and the attention to detail, everything is intentional. So I wouldn't be surprised if he had been exposed to that at some point. Same with Keke Palmer, and I have to give this shout out. Keke Palmer is a Virgo.
I love her.
And you know how Virgos work. So,
They're about the details, huh?
yeah, about the details. So I would not be surprised at all if Jay-Z found was aware of that theory, or at the very least, identify with that thought process of this man that used whatever resources he had at his disposal to reinvent himself into something else, because that is also a part of Jay-Z's origin story as well. So it's probably a mix of the two.
I think so too. I think also too because Jay-Z is really known for his use of words. Like, he's very much someone to do a turn of phrase, double entendre, all that kind of stuff. Like, there'll be sometimes where I'll be like, oh, I didn't even catch that the first time around. That's wild. Like, even years later, I'll listen to something. It's like, oh, I just caught that. So I think because the way that F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, he doesn't just come out and say things.
No.
And I think one of the most, what to you was the most compelling piece of evidence to make you think that
Thank you.
Jay Gatsby was black?
That's good, because I was wondering that.
It's interesting. I feel like there are so many pieces. I feel like, so in Janet's book, when she talks about Nick Carraway being an unreliable narrator, I really appreciate.
And for people who need help with that was Tobey Maguire.
In the movie, yeah. So I thought that was so funny because there is that level of like, because he's a Midwesterner, right? So like we have this tendency in the Midwest to be polite, but to a default sometimes, because he was definitely aware of what was missing, but was like, I'm not going to like spill this man's tea. I'm not gonna spill this man's tea. So I feel like there were a couple of things. One, I feel like Gatsby, definitely the way that they kind of just like went about some of their societal stuff. It's almost like they had gotten so comfortable living in that they're like, I'm just gonna be like so bold and outlandish with it. So like when they talk about the way that the parties were thrown and all of that, so I'm like, yeah. And then I just feel like
the
there
yellow
were so
cocktail
many
music
pieces. Yeah, I feel like there were so many pieces that just kind of alluded to one of these things is not like the other.
Absolutely. And
Like something standing out.
I think it's easy to, so like if you're reading this book and you're not looking at it through that lens, I think it ends up having that universal appeal or that sort of universal story because, like you said, rebuilding yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or not quite fitting into a group and trying to find your space. I mean, I think most people can, any person, no matter what your background, you can kind of relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that most people, when they're taking in that's kind of the vantage point they're coming in at. So.
Yep.
But I thought what was crazy, so now I didn't read the book though, but I saw in this article and even on the episode with Keke Palmer, because she was talking about some kind of note. So like it was this huge thing between the editor of the book and the author, and he wanted to name this book.
I think the editor was Perkins and the author is Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald, yeah. So Tomokio and the West Egg was his first title of the book.
And he was going to have a note in the jacket describing the title.
Yes. Do they say in the book what the letter says?
They were never able to find it.
Never able to find it.
They were never able to find it. She's like, I'm still looking. She's like, she gave a wish list at the end of the book of all the things she wished she had, and that was one of them.
I could see how. But so Tomokio was a character in Roman, like a comedy satire, and it was a former slave who
like in the
earned some
first
wealth.
century, super old.
An old book. And so it's like, well, why in the hell would you pick that for this book if it didn't have something with it? Like he was going hard
What's the
about wanting
symbolism?
this, about wanting this title for the book. So to me, having not even really, like I didn't actually get to see all of those. I'm thinking that's one of the top three. And then also too, he was on 40 Acres, which we all kind of know and are familiar with the 40 Acres and a Mule sort of being the reparations for the enslaved people. I thought that's pretty compelling as well. And then I also too, just going back and reading the book, I was thinking to myself, the way that Gatsby acted, like I know he was hiding more than just his probably parentage or whatever. Because I mean, obviously, wasn't he not a numbers man, but it was a bootlegger. Yeah, a bootlegger. It felt like the way that they had him speaking to people felt like he was trying really hard to say, like just the way he spoke. Like I could only imagine being like a white passing person and feeling like, you know, like he was the only one ever drinking at these parties that he threw. You know what I'm saying? He was always super aware of, you know, what he was saying and what he was doing. Also how he was dressing. I peeped, they kept talking about this pink suit catching the light,
very
of the
loud
sun. And I was just like, I mean, so it wasn't too loud because it was light pink and it was very, but I'm like, you know, we like to be fancy.
But he'd be the
enough
only,
to stand out.
only one.
Yeah, the only drop of color in a like sea of white.
Yes. And you're cutting your hair he was like, his
To
hair
me,
was
okay, you
so-
taking mine because
Go
that was
ahead, you
mine.
can say it.
To me,
I
that was
mean-
the most compelling piece of evidence that he kept his hair super short because that's my thing. I always say your hair always tells on you.
It do.
Like,
It
no
do.
matter what, your hair will tell on you. That's why they take it for the drug test, because you can get around all them drug tests every kind of way except your hair.
Listen, when they pluck those hairs, yeah, the hair will tell on you, because even when we think about like the pervasiveness of like colorism in our entire society, I don't want to put that burden only on black people, because white people are the ones that invented this and reinforced those type of belief systems. But even when you look at that, like people looking at their baby's fingertips and ears to see when the color's gonna turn and if it is gonna turn, and then the hair.
Yeah, so for white people who don't know, for black
yeah,
people,
let's break it
our
down.
babies come out super light.
Yes.
So you can't really tell what color they're gonna be until later, and when they darken up. And so, because sometimes it doesn't happen until they're 2 or 3. Like it it can take a while sometimes, and then like, and also the hair straight when you're born. It's weird.
Yes. Yes. But eventually,
But it curls
will-
up.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think the resistance to this idea, because I feel like this should be a way bigger ideal.
It should
This
be.
being, you know, because I feel like she wrote this in 2016?
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, oh, I'm just now hearing about this. How is that possible? It's like earlier this year when the 2 girls from St. Mary's solved the Pythagorean theorem. It's like, it's like that should be huge. They should be getting a Nobel Prize. Like, people have been trying to do this for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, it must not have been that hard. They did it.
Which is also, it's disrespectful to those women. It's complete bullshit, honestly. And Janet kind of gets to that in her book, because she brings up the, I'm gonna mess it up, but the pyramid or whatever, or the tomb that was discovered in Egypt.
With Cleopatra's tomb.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And people tried to keep saying, no, it can't possibly be,
'Cause
but it was discovered that
It's like, that's too dark.
Yeah. It can't possibly be that, but it's like, yeah, it is. And what Janet says when she brings up that theory, she's like, I brought it up for a reason, because things are discovered when they're supposed to become discovered. So I think that what happened was, it took a person of color to be paying attention, and a woman to be paying attention to certain things, and then pull all these different, pieces of evidence, because in the book it's deeply researched, very, very well. So she's citing every single thing that she's pulling to reinforce this theory that Jay Gatsby is a black man hiding in Whiteface. I think it just takes the right type of person to even discover that, because with white people, they have the burden of being completely like blinded to anything else except for them, because they are the center of their universe, and they have been the center of our collective universe for so long. So it takes a person that is not a part of that to then look and be like, here's this obvious thing that y'all have missed all along.
Right.
And here's all the evidence to back it up.
Say that, because that
Yeah.
takes us perfectly into the idea of spotters. Because this was my first time ever hearing that term.
I never heard of that
And I
either.
research racism a lot.
Well, spell it out, because I didn't read it, so I don't know nothing about
okay.
it.
So, do you want to talk about it, or should I?
About spiders? No, please go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, because this made perfect sense, though. So, back in these times, because I think the time period she said this was like the height of people trying to pass. And so, what would happen is, because white people are so terrible at telling who's black or white, they needed light-skinned black people to spot white passing Negroes for them. Because I do that all the time, too. I'll be like, because sometimes I'm like, they don't even know. Because that's the other thing, too. Like, it's like, you don't even know that somebody in your family was passing.
Yes.
Because
I've had this exact experience.
Yes. And it also, do people remember the Donald Sterling thing with Viv Steviano, and she got him canceled because he didn't even know his own mistress was black. That's how she called him up.
Which was foolish, because the rest of us looked like, how did y'all not know? This actually, and I'm gonna make this real quick, but the spider thing is funny.
Take your time.
It's funny because there was a conversation on Twitter earlier this week with people that did not know Lena Horne was black.
Oh, I totally believe that.
I
I
was
think
like,
that was a
where-
big part of her success. I think that's a huge part of her success.
It's the fact that certain people didn't know she was
Yes.
black. But meanwhile, all of us knew exactly who we was looking at.
Of course.
It's a black woman, duh.
Yes, of course. This goes back to, okay, so
American
Moni,
black.
you didn't get to read the book, but I took some screenshots because there were some parts that were just to die for. But basically, Lottie was one of he had an affair with her.
Okay.
And so during the summer of passion they were having, she asked Gatsby, oh, I'm sorry, for people listening, Gatsby was a huge racist. So just imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Gatsby?
Fitzgerald.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying, wait.
Well, it's funny that you mixed the two because
Exactly.
Hello.
They're the same person pretty much.
They're the same
but
person,
F. Scott
yes.
Key Fitzgerald was a huge racist. His family
Yeah.
were Southern sympathizers and all of that kind of stuff. But one summer when he was young, he was having an affair with a high-end escort named Lottie. And then one day when they were, because she had her own account, and she said one day when we was hanging out, because she was like, man, he was just spouting all this racist shit. And finally she was like, have you ever gone to bed with a colored girl? And he was like, he looked at her all crazy, and she's like, actually, I'll answer that for you. You have, in fact, dozens of times. And he was like inconsolable. He was just like losing his mind because he was like, because like I said, they don't know. She was like, yeah, I'm only like a quarter white, like, and I fooled you. So like,
see, and then I can see how you would take that personally. You're like, this has to be stopped.
It has
These
to be.
hoes are out here tripping. Like, we can't have
Yeah.
them out here like this. Like, do you understand? Like, I could see how if you were somebody, and especially because it sounds like he didn't come from a well-to-do family. You know what I'm saying? Like,
he had a lot of problems.
Yeah, and so it's just interesting to me that people like this usually hate their background, hate where they come from, and that's where a lot of it stems from. It's just a lot of self-hate.
but he did grow up in like the sphere of that society. Like he wasn't really like he was always in that in between where he was like just because he was like Irish. So back in the days, like Irish wasn't quite white yet.
Yes.
But like you could kind of pass. Like if you could get rid of your past, you could all of a sudden go into the magical land of whiteness. Like, I've always been intrigued by media about passing because ultimately I feel like even everyone's passing because whiteness is a myth. So you always have to attain this impossible status because it doesn't really exist and you never get to feel secure in it for sure. Because a lot of times whiteness is, like I said, it's white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, but it's also rich and it's also thin and it's also straight and it's also, you know, it's all of those things. Yes, it's quiet and it's demure and it's perfectly polite and it's all these things that it's impossible to be all the time.
Yep, absolutely. And it's funny that this comes up because in the city that we live in, you know, not unlike other cities, but at one point in time, we had a huge influx of immigrant communities that lived here and had their own identities. They had newspapers in their languages. They were going to their own worship communities, their own grocery stores, their own neighborhoods, etc. A lot of them lived amongst Black people because the ones that were considered white at the time were like, all of y'all can live over there. I grew up in Hallville, so Hallville was settled by Eastern European people, Slovenians, all of that, and then Black people moved in and we had to live amongst each other because they were not accepted as white. But then when they became accepted as white, some of them were changing their last names to become more Anglo, moving to different sides of town, completely abandoning their culture. So there's people to this day that, for instance, we had a huge influx of Arabic people. Some of them to this day walk around and move around as white, but their great grandma was Arabic. They don't know anything about their culture at all because they adopted whiteness in order to survive. So it's really funny how all that works out. But like that's a big reason why our city is the way it is now, and it's stale in a lot of ways because anything that was remotely something else outside of like Anglo was shut down, and the Klan had a lot to do with that as well because they were like, we will burn your shit up.
They really will. Let's talk about it. A full terrorist organization running our state.
Yeah.
That is sad.
It was very sad.
It's super sad. And you're saying that, and then I was thinking like, if, I don't know, what do you guys think the impact of that is now, though? You know what I'm saying? Like, we're talking about that.
Denial.
Like right, because, you know, you're mentioning, like, how people are, because it seems like that's part of the deal, correct? Like, we've read books before. I'm thinking about Trevor Noah's memoir and how he talked a lot about South Africans being able to matriculate into whiteness. But
they had a buffer group.
And they knew the deal. The deal was, like, you have to agree to leave your family behind, your culture behind, to be a part of this. So it was all spelled out, but it's like, I think when it happens here in the States, it's much more, it's not stated, but it's like, yeah, you know, you have to leave behind your Arab or whatever your background is, Black background, because I can't the mobility stops when I'm still trying to attach myself to it. You know what I mean? And you recognize that it's a hurdle. It's a real hurdle.
Yes.
If upward mobility is your only goal, which is capitalism, which is what we're doing. This is what we're saying is important. This is what we've all agreed is okay. So I feel like it's wild.
I feel like the impact, I see it everywhere, but mostly in our school system. Like, people really need to come, we have to, like, revolutionize our education system.
Yeah.
Because it was set up by the Klan. Like, that's just a fact. Like, so, like, the fact of, like, trying to adhere to this, it's also like everything else, it comes back to money. Because I was thinking the other day about how these book bans, it's not just about restricting information, it's also restricting money, because then those authors don't get to sell their books to libraries, who are the biggest purchaser of books.
Yeah, it gets really, really messy when we talk about the book bans. Like, it impacts commerce, and then you also have large institutions. I'm gonna call out Scholastic, aided and abetted in this foolishness by
And are they in on standardized testing too?
I think they are involved in standardized testing.
'Cause that's
I wouldn't
a big
be surprised.
scam.
It's a huge scam. So, you know, organizations like Scholastic are involved in this because instead of them standing on the side of progressiveness and what's actually the right side of history, they're now saying, if your school wants to purchase books, we'll put all the diverse stuff in a separate, you know, little category, and you can opt out of getting those books delivered for the book fair, for the school, the books that are in the classroom, all of that shit. Yeah, so it's like really questionable. So it impacts, like you said, our school system. So now you are intending to build up a generation of people that is incredibly ignorant and not, you know, compassionate toward other people outside of themselves, which then breeds what? More violence, more, you know, racism, patriarchy, misogyny, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I will also say it shows up in the physical sense in our city because of architecture. So if you want to destroy everything old or everything special so that you can have these really homogenous looking buildings and parking lots and whatever, then a city is left with no culture, and then people sit and spend millions of dollars trying to figure out what is the brand of Indianapolis. And it's like, well, we had something.
Well, and then you can always pretend like black people never did anything, because that's always also the narrative too. It's like, well, I mean, we would try to help you, but you guys never do anything.
Lies.
And it's just like, okay, but you destroyed all of our legacies, and every time we've tried to do something, like, we are immediately stopped.
Yeah.
Because can we talk about Dr. Colette Johnson? This is Kat breaking in with a quick correction. It was not Dr. Colette Johnson. It is actually Dr. Colette Pierce Burnett. Apologies.
We can definitely. Let's do it.
So she abruptly just left was she the creative director or just the director at Newfields?
She was the top person. She was the CEO of Newfields. Let me Google to make absolute.
So she came in a couple years ago. I am at Newfields. They posted a job opening for basically the job of their head honcho, and one of the descriptors was, I see you, you look good, girl. So one of the descriptors was they wanted someone to maintain their core white audience. And then shout out to whoever leaked that. Shout out to good white.
I know one of the people involved in that leak was Wild Style Pachel, who is a photographer and historian and community activist here in Indianapolis.
Thank you for everybody who calls this stuff out, because you do take a risk. It's not safe to do.
No.
Like, I'm sure that person has missed out on opportunities because I haven't even deeply looked into it, but it's one of those things where we don't get to see, because the same thing happened in Hamilton County. They brought in a black superintendent, she left too. So there's all these stories where we may never know what happened, but we have a deep suspicion of what happened.
Well, let me read this. This is from Fox 59. It says, Indianapolis, the Newfields Art and Nature Museum announced Friday evening that President and CEO Colette Pierce Burnett has resigned after serving in the role for the last 15 months. A news release did not provide any explanation for her departure. The Art Museum's Board of Trustees announced that Michael Kubacki will resume the roles as the president and CEO on an interim basis. We thank Dr. Burnett for her service to Newfields. The Newfields Board of Trustees chair says she helped deepen our relationships with the community and champion the transformative powers of art and nature. We are grateful for her work, and on behalf of Newfields, we wish her well in her future endeavors. So they don't really know why, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I mean, I think that does happen a lot here when you have, people.
I feel like maybe that was in her contract before she signed that she's not allowed to talk about it.
That she's not allowed to talk about it. I wouldn't be surprised, but then I also think about the burden that women often have to, especially if they intend to continue working, to keep certain things to themselves. So I often think about Dr. Amy, who I'm spacing on her last name, who came out during the whole Brett Kavanaugh situation and talked about the fact that she had been abused and she had been harmed, and how she would not have said anything because it would have been detrimental to her livelihood. And that happens to women all the time in these spaces. Oh yeah, like Anita Hill. Yeah. Anita Hill could have lived her whole life never having to speak about the fact that Justice Clarence Thomas is disgusting. Fill in the blank with whatever word you want to use.
We've all worked with that dude.
Yeah. Everybody has worked with that
and
dude.
Now he's a Supreme Court justice forever.
How disgusting. Forever until he croaks.
With his ugly ass his wife. I'll bring that up every time.
Who helps start the insurrection?
Yes.
It's all disgusting.
Yeah.
Every piece of it.
I like pointing out that so many of those people are deeply unattractive. Because I think it's important for everybody to know this. Racism makes you ugly.
Hello.
It does not.
It's not cute.
Hello.
I pointed out last time we were doing the Supermodels documentary and stuff like that. They rode for Naomi Campbell. Same thing, Marilyn Monroe. Like, cute white people aren't racist.
Wow.
Listen, hello. Yeah, it's
racism.
It's a bad situation.
I'm gonna say it. It's a cat saying it. Racism is bad for your skin.
And a lot of other stuff, probably.
Yep.
Yeah, man, this was, I felt like this was a really good topic because, like I said, this was something that we came up on just on the humble. So I'm glad that you mentioned this because I've deeply, exploring this, classic piece of literature from this vantage point. You see all of the conversations that we sparked just from talking about this book that was written, in the a long time ago.
Nella Larson's book,
Passing. I was thinking about Passing earlier when we were talking about how old boy had no idea he had been messing with a colored woman that entire time. Yeah, Fitzgerald.
So do you think he pushed her out, or do you think old girl pushed her out?
Of the window?
Yeah.
Whew, it is so
or do you
tricky.
Think she jumped? Because to me, it's like between.
Honestly, for me. And the film was so deeply unsettling, but it was so beautifully done. The story was so beautifully done, and it was unsettling for a reason. I think it was intended to be so. I really think that the way that they shot it and the way that the story is told is to leave the interpretation up to you as the viewer or the reader to be any three of those things, because it honestly could be, and maybe it's all of them together, I don't know, but it's like it could have been him because of his shame. It could have been old girl because of her own internal shame.
Keep your goddamn hands off my man.
Yes. Yeah. You tried to come in and break up because old girl could not, either she couldn't or she decided not to access what the other lady that was passing access. So she's like, I'm gonna do the best I can. I'm gonna get with this hardworking black man, have his black children, and just try to live my life out the best I can. But now you coming in and you fucking shit up. You blowing up my spot. But then also a girl, because of everything she had going on, just completely unsettled within herself. Maybe she did jump on her own. So I am torn. I couldn't make up my mind. Okay. I couldn't make up my mind.
I think you're right. We're left with that. But
yeah.
But in that book, to me, what was interesting is when she and her husband were just between themselves discussing her and about, passing in general. They were like, they always come back.
Because you get tired. She
was like, they always come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not for nothing, because I grew up around like kind of the rich whites and went to school with them. They are miserable. Like that's the thing. Like it's nothing to aspire to.
No. So I have a question for you. Given that that was your experience, did you feel like I need to have a Black space to go back to after I exist in this world for however many hours a day? Like I gotta have somewhere to go to.
Oh, I already did. It was called home. Like
Yes.
it was the 80s. It was still segregated. Like
Yeah.
I could go to school there, but I couldn't live out there.
Got
Like that's
it.
the thing. Like
Got
they
it.
weren't legally allowed to keep me out if the checks cleared. Like if there was a way to do that, they would have. But because
Yeah.
of, you know, like the way things are set up, they can't just say like, they can't lie and say there's not room. I actually do remember a family member of mine applying to work there, and they straight up told her, we're not ready for a Black teacher.
Wow.
So yeah, it was
We're not
to
ready.
me, there is, because I was a child wanting to be accepted, but then at a certain point when you realize it's not going to happen, there is a freedom in that. Because to me, maybe that's
Yeah.
why I never really related to the Gatsby character all the way, because I was like, I'd never go through all this work to be accepted by white people. Like
No.
I just would not ever. But to answer your question, yes, it was called my neighborhood home. Like
Yeah.
I would go home and just, the only time I was around white people was at school.
Yeah.
And so then I would go home, and it was awkward because I didn't go to school with my peers in my neighborhood. But yeah, I still just had home and work and stuff, you know, like, but it took a while because I was so young.
Yeah.
You know, like it took a while to put all the pieces together, because at first I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Because that was the other thing too. I went to an integrated church. So even before I went to that school, I was around white people, but I was around a different type of white people. These were white people who were choosing to miscegenate. And
Got
then
it.
I was kind of put in an environment where I was around white people who were still trying to segregate, and I was being forced in.
Yeah, yeah. It's a deep piece. Like for me, so I grew up in Hawville, which for people that are unfamiliar, West Side neighborhood in Indianapolis
Come on, 16th and Tibbs.
Listen, Bellevue, King Street, St. Clair, Tremont, all of that. So like, you know, and when I was coming up, it's predominantly Black neighborhood. Now it's predominantly Black and Hispanic. When it was originally settled, yep, hola, you know, Pola Rasa, all that. So like, earlier when it was very first settled, it was settled by Eastern European immigrants and then Black people who moved in. So my family came off the farm to the avenue to Hawville. Like that is the transition from my family on my mom's and my dad's side. So like I'm in a deeply Black experience. Going to school, we were bused. So we were like the second generation of kids to be bused out to Wayne Township from Hawville, because early on there used to be like schools in the neighborhood, but then when they start closing the schools and they did the desegregation, so now they're shipping us out to go to school. So I had been bused through most of my school career. So then you go to school, and I struggled because I was put in like these class atmospheres with predominantly white kids, and by nature of me being who I am, like I'm excelling in certain worlds, but it's not because I wanted to be white. I had no desire ever to even be none of that. But then when you start to, just like in the animal kingdom, when like an animal goes out and then they interact with humans and they come back and you smell different to like your people, then they're just like, something's wrong. Yeah. What's going on with you? So like I always felt like I had to work extra hard to remind the people that I love and that I know and that I'm a part of, I am no different than you. So then trying to figure out how to like balance all of that out. But yeah, the whole like having a safe space to come back to was super important, but also like knowing how to like do the whole code switch thing was like a trip. But I was like, however much of this I got to do to just like exist, but then not like lose my sanity and my like soul and my spirit. Like I do have limits with things. So if that causes you to think I'm rebellious or I don't fit or I miss out on certain opportunities, that's fine. Because at the end of the day, I still have to go back home and I have to be accepted at home, because that's the point. Whether or not I'm acceptable enough to you, white people, is besides the point.
Because it will never happen.
No, never. Especially when you look like me. Ain't a chance
And this
in
is
the
I mean, this is
world.
also visual medium. It's mostly an audio medium.
beautiful,
Like, yeah,
so.
she's not passing.
Okay.
Nah, and I like to be
In the best
outside. in the best way. No, and I like to be outside. I was never going to be like, oh, let me stay indoors so I can try to preserve however much little whatever. No,
And also too, with a name like Ebony, like you're announcing
it's a
yourself.
rap. It's a rap. And do you know I worked for a black man once that did not want me to go by my first name. Wow. He requested that I go by my middle name because he didn't want people to misjudge. Because he was like, you can pretend enough over the phone, or an email. So go by your middle name as opposed to your first name because that'll work out better for us. And he hired a blonde that was his like right hand woman that would go out with him to go do stuff. My hair was too nappy and my name was Ebony. I wasn't gonna be that one.
And see, as someone who can pass over the phone, because my name is very Anglo.
Oh man, life's so much easier on the phone.
I can only imagine until you show up and they're like, oh
boy.
Here she come, causing problems.
It's really sad because my mom, she works, she's retired now, but when she was working and that would happen, like her name is very Anglo and over the phone, she's very professional. And so when they would meet her and they would request a different agent afterwards, and my mom's so cool, she'd be like, oh, well, but it's like, that still hurts. I don't care what you say.
I'm sure it does.
No matter what, it's like, because she was good at her job.
Yep. That just happened to my husband. That just happened because he was like, babe, guess what? I'm like, what? He went out to do, he was doing a quote for this job that he was going to do for a customer. Everything was set up. His, like the email thing that he uses, like it'll send you a text message an hour before he's going to be there so that you know. And so he pulls up, mind you, he does pressure washing. So he has this huge trailer, like there's lots of prep that goes into it. Pulls up, goes to knock on the door. The lady opens the door and she was like, oh, I changed my mind. Awful. He was beside himself. And mind you, he cannot pass at all, okay? There's no way.
Would you describe your husband as a large black man?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just, because in my mind, I imagined a large black man.
He's a large black man. And I said, he was just like,
because no one's going to be like, well, maybe he's Puerto Rican or Italian or,
opposite attract. It's definitely not. But I felt bad for him because he was just like, it sent her the email like an hour before. Like, if she wanted to cancel her appointment, she had so many opportunities. I drove all the way out here to, let's call him out. Was it Zionsville? Not Zionsville. Maybe. No, maybe it was Zionsville, but it was like the part that was there before it was kind of fancy.
Before it got annexed or whatever they call it. Yeah,
but it's just, I'm like, that was good old-fashioned racism because there was really no reason. And then had the nerve to call him back talking about...
You know what I love?
I said, do not.
When white people complain about us not wanting to work, but then not hiring us, that's always so fun. Isn't that fun?
It's really, really stupid. Yeah, it's really stupid. And I'm just like, y'all should be over it.
It's like, because I've had a friend who was like, I was always amazed, like, sometimes the stories I hear from people I know who are white and they don't realize how crazy the stuff they are, what they're saying, because it's like, I would have been arrested. Do you understand? Like, my life would have been over at that point. Like, but this is just a day for you. Like, when you said, like, when they get funky with the police and all that kind of stuff, it's like, are you kidding me right now?
Yeah.
And it's like, and I remember one time I'm like, man, it don't take nothing for you to get a job. You just get jobs on jobs on jobs.
Yes, and then show up and be like, when I see, this is so funny. There's this trend on TikTok of the personality hire. Okay. And they're like, you're the personality hire, meaning like you show up, you really don't do no work. You just chit chat and like make jokes with people and be the fun friend at work. You're just the vibe at work. And I'm like, that's so cute. There's no way.
Must be nice.
I'm like, that's a white girl job because ain't no way we get to do that.
A lot of like, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, what do you do?
Nothing.
And everybody knows you do nothing.
Yep.
Everybody knows.
You just kick it.
Collaborates and cooperates to make sure that you don't. And it's like, oh, Tanya, she, she's clearly a mom trying to get away from home, basically. And she's just here making friends. And it's like,
do you ever watch Will and Grace?
I have, but I
like
can't,
Karen. Like I was always like, what does Karen do?
She's married to a rich man.
Yeah, I was like, why is she even here? And she really didn't do anything.
To drink and cause problems.
To drink and cause problems. I want that to be my job. I'd be so good at that.
Listen, that's why I identify, if we want to go on to a whole nother reference. Okay, so did y'all watch Lovecraft Country?
Sure did, many times.
Yes, so good. So the episode where Ruby gets to be the white woman and she just does all that stuff, and certain people felt a way about that episode, and I said, y'all don't get it. Y'all don't get it.
Certain people.
A few people that I talked to at the time felt a way about it, and I said, y'all don't get it. It is about the freedom to just not give a fuck.
So you made it that far into the series and now you're upset?
Yes, I was like, of all the things that you could have felt a way about, but see, it's because it was a black woman, an
They didn't feel anything about the fiery crosses on the lawn?
Any of the other things you could have been upset about, but the fact that an undeniably black, full-figured woman could have the audacity to have an opportunity to be a carefree white woman and took it, that made people feel
You know
away.
what killed me? And then she went out and got a job.
Yes. She went to go work. I said, of all the things you could have did, she's like, I'm going to go get a
You
job.
got a white man just handing you money. I'm like, I don't see why.
But she needed something to do with her time, I guess.
Find something to do. I don't know. I
It's
don't know why people
all
have
the
trouble
books
with
to be
that.
read.
I mean, I don't work job. I am a job. I don't know why I need to.
Bull.
Okay.
But
That's
I got
interesting,
it.
though.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the part they had a problem with in that series. So not the part where he shot that Korean guy in the head or anything like that, or because to me that was super upset. Or that Korean woman when it was Jonathan Major's character. Remember when they had the Korean War part where the girl was turning into that fox that ate people's souls?
yes,
And then he shot her best friend in the head. And she kept fucking him. Like that was upsetting.
That was very upsetting. That was very upsetting. There were so
hope,
many
If someone
moments.
shoots you in the head, I'm not going. I hope you know that.
Well, listen,
I sure won't.
I'm glad to know that.
I sure
Nope,
won't.
that would have been the end of it for me. But yeah, no, that part is what bothered people, and I said, "Wow, that was the people that it bothered was very telling to me about like what kind of issues that they got internally." Because I was like, "Oh, so you probably hate to see me have a good time. You probably just." You would never say it to my face, but it probably bothers you.
I'm sorry, this is still blowing my mind because for people who haven't watched Lovecraft Country, it's deeply disturbing. It's really good, but there's a lot of deeply disturbing imagery in there. And the fact that a carefree black woman bothered you in that series is wild.
Very wild.
That's tough.
Very.
Gosh, you guys. Oh my gosh. So here's the one part too of like, so re-listening to The Great Gatsby, the novel, toward the end of the book, you know, you have this man, I forget his name, but him and his wife clearly aren't happy. Something's going on.
Oh,
He's got her holed up
Daisy
in
and
the house.
Tom.
Daisy and Tom.
Yes.
You know, there's they're alluding to them
He's
fighting.
not sure she's all the way white.
Nope. There are plenty of moments where that's kind of a thing.
But of course, who's really white?
See, that part. Well, I can tell you this. He had the lady holed up in the house. At some point, she gets out, gets hit by a car. She gets hit by a car or something,
No,
right?
that's not Daisy.
Who am I talking about then? That's who I'm talking
That's
about.
the mistress.
That's the mistress. That's Wilson's wife.
Okay.
I can't remember her name.
Okay, well, so maybe
Myrtle.
say this part.
Myrtle.
So the lady gets hit by a car.
Myrtle.
And Myrtle gets hit by a car or whatever. And the thing that
By
I found,
Tom.
Yes, but then they blame it, of
On a
course,
black man. It was a black guy.
every time.
Every time.
Every time.
Every time.
he was like, "Don't tell him I was driving that car."
See?
Because that was the other thing too. Because I haven't read the book in a while. Because I'm wondering did he kill her on purpose? Was she pregnant?
Ooh, see, you done opened up a whole new can of
Because
worms.
he's sleeping with somebody else's wife, and a lot of times that's the move is to kill the mistress when she becomes inconvenient.
For sure.
don't
Yeah, she
know.
either get
Especially
pregnant or
when
she
you're
she
rich,
goes
because She
crazy.
can make demands on you now that she has your child.
Absolutely. So it was either that or she went crazy and they're like, she got
She was
to
a
be
liability.
girl.
She
Yeah,
a
it was
liability
giving
at this
Marilyn
point.
Monroe.
Put a muzzle
Yep.
on her.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit.
Oh, listen, put
Put a muzzle on
Put
her.
a muzzle on her.
About. You know what I'm talking about? We
Yeah.
won't even get into that, but I'm saying that
Is that
because
Yeah.
that was him. It's like, oh gosh,
Trash.
Just
oh
make them
gosh.
tracks, buddy.
Trash.
Please, man, hush. Okay? Like, damn, when you can't do shit else, you just hush.
Yeah.
But no, what struck me was that, you know, you have this white man of resources convincing this poor white man to do his dirty work, basically, and he ends
Even though
up,
I've been fucking your wife well.
I just was like, isn't that the story though? Isn't that really what happens? Is that the class person?
I liked book. The book is really messed up as far as stories goes. I'm like, it is realistic, but damn, like that's really messed up. Like, there wasn't a lot of people to cheer for in this book, and it's like, so all the rich white people won. Yay!
Yeah. It's terrible, but you know what? As awful as that is, and like you said, it's realistic. It could be taken so many different ways, and I really think when it comes down to it, I am not a fan of banning books, like, period, whatsoever. I don't care if I think the book's good or not, whatever. It's, for me, it comes down to the context of which things are taught. So I did not have the experience of being taught this book in school, but I wonder, do y'all remember ever having any crucial or critical conversations about race and class when reading it? See, and I had a feeling that was going to be the reaction and the response.
No, let me
just
take
wondered.
that back. Yes. Sister
Okay.
Louise, U.S. history, sophomore year. And I remember people got really pissed off about it. And she was a nun. She was black, but very light-skinned black, so she might have gotten in under the radar. But she had green eyes, so they might not have known. They might not have known. But she would, and she really upset a lot of people.
Yeah.
But not in literature. I remember my English teacher, she didn't know anything. Because actually, I remember writing a couple of theses. She was like, wow, I've never heard of this. I'm like, bitch, you went to college.
You are teaching this class.
Yeah, she was a first year teacher though.
God bless her.
But yeah, I was just thinking to myself, so I was like, so I've read more books than you? That's messed up.
It's wild. But yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
So what
for
about
another
you
day.
though? Like, do you remember having those critical
not about this book,
Well,
but
just in
in
general.
other classes, yes. So I remember when we read The Color Purple, it got hectic in class, and the teacher almost
grade
had
was
to
this?
be. I believe I was a sophomore. I think I was either a sophomore or a junior when I read that. Yeah, and it got hectic in class because I took it upon myself because I was the kid that would go to, sometimes I would go to the library during lunch if I didn't have a lunch crew. Because our lunch periods would be different, me and my friends. So if I didn't have a crew, I was like, I'll just go to the library and just read during lunch or whatever. And it was like, that year I remember my lunch period was mad early too. And I was like, I'm not even hungry yet, so I can just eat after school.
Right.
Taco Bell, I was heavy on Taco Bell back then. But long story short, I had started reading about womanism in the library because I was getting like Alice Walker stuff and different things like that. So I'm mixing that together with reading Color Purple at the time. And I remember getting very hectic in class because I was on that part when they talk about how the white man would try to convince you that he's God because you hear his voice on the radio and his face is on the cover of the, the Quaker Oat box and the this and that.
And didn't her daddy tell her God was white when she was writing letters to God?
She was Alice Walker?
Well, I'm sorry,
Or
Seeley.
Seeley in The Color Purple?
Yeah.
Probably so. I wouldn't be surprised. I have to go back and reread
Okay,
Color Purple.
I remember that blowing my mind because she was writing letters to God. Like, that's part of the structure of the book. And her stepfather tells her, it's like, God ain't reading your letters. God's white.
Yeah. So it all went together, yeah. But yeah, I remember it getting really hectic in class because I never felt ashamed of bringing any of that type of stuff up. But when you're in a class full of like white people and some of them feel a way about that, they will take any of that to be offensive. Like I remember when I pointed out that, all life derived from Africa, and one of my classmates telling me, Ebony, that's the most racist thing I've ever heard. And I was like, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. And we had a whole argument in class, and the teacher had to like break it up. And I was like, I mean, it's not even a matter of who's right or wrong. Like, they're clearly wrong from the book that we're all reading.
This is very relatable because I remember getting into a similar debate with Adam Andretti one day in class, and he
is he a part of the
yes, he is.
God bless again. I'm like, my Lord.
And he was like, because I said something to the effect of Egypt being in Africa. He's like, Egypt's not in Africa. I was like, sir, we're in a room with a globe. Like,
look at it.
It's right there. And he's like, that's the Middle East.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, sir,
wow.
Africa's a landmass, like the whole thing. And it's like, that to me, and I'm like, and I don't remember going with back and forth with him. I was like, wow, this is very telling. Because I just remember being struck by the fact, like, you would rather just believe a fiction than the fact that greatness could come from Africa.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of like. All right, you guys, so welcome back from the break. Wow, this has been, I mean, I just feel like
We need like 4 more hours.
we do. Like, just hold them hostage for more. I feel like this was a really great topic because, like I said, I feel like it's taken us into a lot of relevant conversations that apply to today. I mean, this is what's fascinating, that we can take a piece of art that was made back in the early 1900s and talk about it today and it's still relevant, which is why we like to encourage people to do that and to revisit these stories. It's also why we talk a lot about, banned books and making this information accessible. And also critical thought is just such a big thing. So shout out to, Janet Savage for doing the work. Like you said, I mean, it usually just takes somebody being curious about something, digging into it, and then the fact that she decided to share this information. She said that she ended up writing this book during a time where she got laid off from her job, and she had heard that information. She was like, I got time today. Yeah. And just kind of dug into it. So I really appreciate all of the research that went into it. Again, she's a lawyer. Yeah, all that work that went into it. So so just some final thoughts on the book overall, you guys. Were there any other themes that you wanted to touch on before we kind of wrap it on up?
I think just the overall theme, because a lot of times people associate, and it's funny because we are technically in the roaring 20s.
We are. They are roaring.
Yeah, they're roaring
so
in
loud.
a way.
They are.
They're definitely doing that. So it's fascinating because it just makes me think of these themes of the quote unquote American dream, absolutely fueled by capitalism. And what does that even mean to us today? Because at one point in time, it's like only certain people could really access it. And that still tends to be the case, but a lot of us are kind of sold on the idea that we could if we jump through however many hoops, that are set in front of us to jump through to do so. Like it was mentioned earlier, the idea of passing, we're all passing in some way. But, what is the implication of doing so? In this case, the house always wins.
It's rigged. It's
these games if you want to.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to what is the cost of that though? Like at the end of the day, what is the cost? What are you willing to give up to be a part of this world that or this system that is built to make sure that it's impenetrable? Like you are, you can amass, you can be successful. We've seen it. We've seen iconic figures in our community reach the heights that we would think were absolutely unattainable. And then
I'm not black, I'm OJ.
I'm OJ. You know what I'm saying? And then you get caught up because guess what America will remind you? We'll let you get so far. It's not there. It's your card is getting pulled.
Dream's over. Time to wake up.
The card's getting pulled. You know what I'm saying? So I do think that that's a relevant sort of way of that's a through line, and I see that, and it's like, wow, this is fucking crazy. What about you, friend?
I was gonna read something out of the book.
Okay.
It was a quote. The book works without Gatsby being black, but it works even better if he is, end quote. I think that says it all, because if you're gonna talk about the American novel and not talk about race, America's code for race. So to me, it puts it in a light where it's like, okay, now this is interesting. Now this is worth talking about. It's not just about classism. Yeah. It is, but what is the ultimate divider of class? Yeah.
Right. It ended up being race.
Yeah. I'm gonna give Janet's book. I'm gonna rate it now. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and give it 5 out of 5 yellow cars.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. Okay. I mean, I can't really rate the book because I did not read it. I think that rereading the book, or I can't even remember if I read it now, if I'm being honest, because I was like, I don't remember this. Yeah, like I know I don't think I read it in school because I went through a phase of like reading classic American literature. I was like, I'm gonna read like the Jane Austen novels. I'm gonna read the all of
Huxley.
I did. I read that one, Brave New World, stuff like that. So, and I feel like that was one of the books I read. But then when I listened to it, I'm like,
It didn't stick with you.
Yeah, nothing ever does. So, but that book, if reading it with that kind of subtext of like him being black, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. Let me see, what I'm gonna give it. 4 out of 5. Bootleg liquor bottles or something. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Them little bottles with the X's on them.
Yeah, them boys.
Because you may or may not be poisoned with this bathtub swill that they gave you. Yeah, I'm definitely going to rate Janet's book a 5 out of 5 pink suits. Because I was trying to decide is it going to be a caramel suit or a pink suit, but let's do a pink suit. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the depth with which she researched this, idea that kind of existed out there.
So many citations.
So many. In another world, if I had ample amount of time, I would go back and pull all the citations and then read those. I ain't got that time. But, if somebody does, go on and do that so we can deepen our research even more. And I just find it interesting because when you mentioned, Moni, about going back to reread like this canon of like great American literature, our entire country is built on these myths, Like if we look at, because I know y'all get into Joseph Campbell and stuff like that. So it's like, even if you don't read the stuff, having an understanding about where it came from is integral to understanding how America works, because people base their everything off this shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that idea that you're saying that, the myth, that the stories that we create, and just how, it ends up being more fantastical than the reality. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that reality has to be there. And I do think that it makes it a way more compelling novel, in that way. One thing that I wanted to just touch on, my final thoughts, basically echo what Kat said. Like, it makes it way more interesting, but Fitzgerald himself said that even the most enthusiastic contemporary, this is a quote, contemporary reviewers fail to understand what the novel was about. It's often referred to as a novel where much is said about the implication and ellipsis, which must be weighed and measured to appreciate its artistic grandeur. And so that kind of is echoing the same thing, but in his words, he was even saying people didn't know what this book was about. And it just makes it more interesting that way. Even though the message is terrible, it's like, you can get close, but nice try, because we will kill you. And that is a huge part of the American story. As painful as that is, as fucked up as it is, nobody wants to be associated with it, but it's real. And we still feel the echoing of that today. Yes, absolutely.
Ask Emmett Till. Oh, you can't. They killed him.
Oh, gosh. Listen. Yeah, man. So, this was a great episode. This was really, we talk about some heavy stuff, though, but I had a really fun time.
Thanks for being so generous with your time.
I know. This was fabulous.
Absolutely. I love talking with y'all. So I appreciate this conversation and exposing me to this piece of, America lore in a whole new world. I
immediately thought of you when I saw the book. I was like, we got to talk about this with Ebony. She'll get it.
She sure did. She's like, man, we got to get Ebony on.
She'll get it. I don't even have to explain it. It's like, girl.
Listen.
Yes. So thank you so much. I do want to give you an opportunity to shout yourself out for our listeners. Let everybody know what you have going on, and if they're looking for you, where they can find you.
Absolutely. So I am at Ebony the Writer. Everything is spelled traditionally on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. I love TikTok now, so I'm always sharing, just random things in the life of a Black girl living in Naptown. You can learn more about me at ebonychappel.com. I host a monthly dance series called Free People Party in the city of Indianapolis on last Sundays right now, and then eventually, who knows what that'll turn into. But long story short, you can find out more on social and on my website. But thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. As always, we had a grand time talking to you. And so, guys, I think we're going to wrap this up.
I think we need to spin the wheel.
Oh, spin it. Spin it.
How apropos, because we're going to be talking about being unstoppable. Like my mouth.
Ooh, okay. Your mouth, my mouth, her mouth, our mouths in general.
Yes, we're going to be covering our fantastic experience at the CCC Unstoppable event. We had so many great guests. You're going to love it. It was inspiring.
It was, and so much fun. So you guys, please tune in next week. Please come back. We have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And with that, we'll let you go, guys. Enjoy your week. Bye.
Before we go, we must give thanks to Urban Nerd for providing our music, and legal services were handled by Trezene M. Atkins. If you like what you heard, please feel free to join us every Wednesday for another fake-ass book club. Cheers. Thank you guys for listening. You can check us out at thefabpodcast.com. Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you're listening right now. We want to hear from you. Come put it in our life. Thanks again, and until next time, peace, love, and the Fake Ass Book Club. We out.